Captain John Reeves stood with his back straight in the grand chamber of the Galactic Council. The circular room stretched high above him, with seats rising in rings where hundreds of alien representatives watched. Light from the three suns of Centauri Prime filtered through the crystal dome overhead, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floor. "The Council has reached its decision," announced High Chancellor Zorax, his blue skin shimmering as he rose from his throne. His four eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of finality among his kind. Earth and its inhabitants are deemed too dangerous for continued participation in galactic affairs. John fought to keep his face neutral. 6 months of hearings, appeals, and promises had come to nothing. Beside him, Ambassador Susan Miller clutched her tablet so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "The evidence is clear," continued Zorax. "In merely 50 years since discovering faster-than-light travel, humans have disrupted trade agreements, challenged territorial boundaries, and questioned traditions maintained for millennia. Your species advances too quickly and without proper respect for established order." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. The oldest races, the Zoraxians and Vendithi, nodded their approval. They had been the loudest voices calling for Earth's removal. "By unanimous vote, Earth will be isolated. A barrier will be erected at the edge of your solar system, beyond the orbit of Mars. No ships will pass in or out. The barrier will be activated in 6 standard months." Susan stepped forward. "High Chancellor, we request more time to prepare our people. 6 months is not enough time." "The decision is final," interrupted Zorax. "Be grateful for the time granted." Many called for immediate isolation. The meeting ended abruptly. As aliens filed out of the chamber, John noticed how few even looked at the human delegation. 50 years of partnership, erased like it never happened. "They're afraid of us," whispered Defense Minister William Carter, a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes. "They see how quickly we've caught up to technology they took thousands of years to develop." Susan shook her head. "It doesn't matter why. 3 billion people are about to be cut off from the stars." John followed them into a small side room where they could talk privately. The walls were soundproofed against even the most sensitive alien hearing. "It's time for planned exodus," said Carter, his voice low but urgent. Susan looked alarmed. "The colony ships, they're not ready." "They'll have to be," John replied. "We have 6 months to get as many people out as we can." Carter activated a secure display on his wrist device. It showed a map of the galaxy with several routes marked in red, all leading away from Council space. "Our deep space probes found these star systems beyond Council territory. We believe they contain habitable planets." John studied the map. "That's at least a 20-year journey, even with our fastest ships." "Better than imprisonment," said Carter. "The Council thinks they know everything about our capabilities, but they don't know about the ships we've been building in the asteroid belt." Susan sat heavily in a chair. "How many can we save?" "Maybe 1 million people, possibly 2 if we really push construction," Carter replied. "Not enough, I know." "And the rest?" asked John. "We tell them we'll come back," Susan said firmly. "And we will, once we establish colonies and build our strength." John nodded slowly. "So we pretend to accept the Council's decision while secretly planning our escape. And our return," added Carter. "This isn't the end of humanity's story in the galaxy. It's just the beginning." The three fell silent, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them. Outside the window, alien ships filled the sky, their lights blinking against the darkening day. Soon, Earth would stand alone. "They think they're containing us," John said finally, "but they're just forcing us to find our own path." Susan's expression hardened with resolve. "Then let's make it a path they never expected." Project Director Karen Wright walked through the massive underground hangar beneath the Nevada desert. Around her, thousands of workers swarmed over the colony ships like ants. The noise was deafening. Welding, hammering, shouting, but to Karen, it sounded like hope. We've modified the life support systems on 30 ships already, reported her assistant, Jack Powell. He struggled to keep pace with her quick strides. The other 20 will be ready in 3 weeks. Karen nodded. And the cryosleep chambers. Testing at 98% efficiency. We can put half the passengers in deep sleep to conserve resources. 4 months had passed since the Galactic Council's decision. On the surface, Earth's governments publicly accepted their fate. Diplomatic meetings continued. Alien delegations were welcomed with smiles and assurances of peaceful compliance. But underground, in secret facilities across the planet, humanity prepared for escape. What about the selection process? Karen asked as they entered the command center. Screens covered the walls, showing progress reports from similar facilities in China, Russia, and Brazil. Jack grimaced. That's the hardest part. How do you choose who gets to leave and who stays behind? We don't, Karen replied. The lottery system is the only fair way. The world governments had agreed. Every human would have an equal chance to be selected for the exodus. Scientists, doctors, and engineers were the only exceptions, distributed carefully among the ships to ensure each vessel had the skills needed for survival. In the center of the room stood a holographic display of the solar system. A thin red line marked the planned position of the Council's barrier. Our latest intelligence suggests they're already assembling the barrier generators, said General Chris Baker, joining them at the display. His uniform looked crisp despite the fact he'd been working for 20 hours straight. We need to launch within 6 weeks, not 2 months. Karen felt her stomach tighten. The ships on the far side of the asteroid belt won't be ready. Then we launch with 45 ships instead of 50, Chris said firmly. Better than losing them all. Karen couldn't argue with that. She touched a control panel, and the hologram zoomed out to show the planned routes. 5 different paths, each leading to a different star cluster beyond Council space. The probes sent back promising data from the Orion sector, she said. At least 3 potentially habitable planets. 20 years is a long journey, Jack said quietly. Karen looked at him. We've planned for it. The ships are essentially moving cities. Children will be born, grow up, and have their own children before we reach our destination. Outside the command center, a bell rang, signaling shift change. Through the window, Karen watched as workers left their posts, replaced by fresh teams. Many had families who had not been selected in the lottery. They worked knowing they were building ships they would never board. That night, Karen sat alone in her office, reviewing the passenger manifests. 1,200,000 people. That's how many they could save. The rest, nearly 3 billion, would remain on Earth. The official story was that the ships were going to establish a colony within the solar system, safely behind the barrier. Once established, they would return for more people. It wasn't entirely a lie. They would return someday, though not as quickly as people hoped. Her screen flashed with an incoming message from President Howard. It was brief. Barrier construction accelerating. Council ships increasing patrols. Launch window closing. Initiate final countdown. Karen closed her eyes for a moment. Then she pressed the emergency alert button. Across the planet, in hidden facilities and underground hangars, the final phase began. It was time for humanity to slip away into the darkness of space, unknown to their galactic jailers. The silent departure had begun. Chief Engineer Alan Foster wiped sweat from his forehead as he crawled through the narrow maintenance tube of the colony ship Defiance. The ship had been traveling for 18 years now, and systems were starting to fail more frequently. "Hand me the pulse wrench," he called to his apprentice, a young woman named Maria who had been born during the journey. Maria passed him the tool. "Is it the coolant regulator again?" Alan nodded. "3rd time this month. We're pushing these ships beyond what they were designed for." The Defiance was one of 42 remaining vessels traveling in loose formation through uncharted space. They had lost 7 ships over the years, 3 to drive failures, 2 to micrometeorite collisions, 1 to a mysterious radiation burst, and the perseverance to catastrophic system failure just 6 months ago. When Alan finished the repairs, he and Maria made their way to the central hub of the ship. The Defiance, like all the colony vessels, had been built in a circular design. The outer ring rotated to create artificial gravity. The central hub housed the command center where Captain Linda Morris oversaw ship operations. "How bad is it?" Linda asked as Alan entered the command center. "We can keep her running," Alan replied. "But I've had to cannibalize parts from secondary systems. Our margins are getting thinner." Linda nodded gravely. At 53, she had been 35 when the journey began. Her once brown hair was now mostly gray. "Dr. Powell wants to speak with you." "She's in hydroponics." The hydroponics bay occupied a large section of the ship's middle ring. Here, under artificial lights, plants grew in carefully maintained nutrient solutions. The room was humid and smelled of earth and green things, the closest thing to nature the shipborne children had ever known. Dr. Lisa Powell looked up from her tablet as Alan entered. "There you are. Come look at this." She led him to a row of plants with broad leaves and small fruits. "I've modified these tomatoes to produce 30% more food with the same resources. If we implement the change across all the ships, we can stretch our food supplies another 3 years." Alan smiled. "That's the best news I've heard in months." Lisa nodded, but her expression remained serious. "We need the extra time. Our latest deep space scans show the first target system isn't suitable. Too much radiation from the local star. So we continue to the second target." "Yes, another 2 years minimum." As they talked, a group of children ran through the hydroponics bay, laughing. Among them was 10-year-old Peter Jackson, born in space, who had never felt real gravity or breathed unfiltered air. Ellen watched them. "Sometimes I wonder if we'll make it. 20 years is a long time in space." "We'll make it," Lisa said firmly. "We have to." Later that day, all ship captains gathered for their weekly communication meeting. Holograms flickered into existence in the Defiance's conference room as leaders from the remaining ships appeared. Captain George Willis of the Horizon spoke first, his face grim. "We've lost contact with the Endeavour. Our sensors detected a massive energy surge in their reactor before communications cut off. We have to assume the worst." A heavy silence filled the room. Another ship lost. Another 100,000 lives gone. Captain Morris finally spoke. "We'll adjust our formation to cover their position, and we'll hold a memorial service tomorrow." After the meeting, Alan stood at the observation window, looking out at the endless stars. Somewhere out there was their destination, a new home where humanity could rebuild. Peter Jackson joined him, pressing his small hand against the glass. "Mr. Foster, is it true we're almost there?" Alan looked down at the boy. He thought about the failed first target system, the additional years of travel ahead, and the dwindling resources. "We're getting closer every day," he said gently. "And when we arrive, you'll help us build something amazing." Peter smiled, his eyes reflecting the distant stars that would be his inheritance. Governor Patricia Davis stood on the hillside, watching the sunrise over New Terra. The morning light painted the settlement with a golden glow. Below, thousands of prefabricated homes and newly built structures spread across the valley. Fields of earth crops mixed with native blue-leaved plants stretched to the horizon. "It's beautiful," said Dr. Ryan Collins, joining her on the hill. "Hard to believe we've only been here for 14 months. Patricia nodded. "Sometimes I forget what it was like living on the ships." After 23 years of travel, the 42 remaining colony ships had reached the Orion cluster. New Terra was the first planet they settled, a world with gravity slightly stronger than Earth's but with breathable air and abundant water. The landing had not been easy. 2 ships had crashed during descent, though most people had survived. "How's the excavation going?" Patricia asked, turning to face Ryan. Ryan's eyes lit up with excitement. "You need to come see for yourself. We've uncovered something remarkable." They walked to the edge of the settlement where several large tents covered a dig site. Workers carefully removed soil from what appeared to be a metal structure buried in the ground. "We found it 3 days ago," Ryan explained as they entered the main tent. "At first, we thought it might be ore deposits, but it's clearly artificial." In the center of the tent was a partially excavated doorway. The metal had a bluish tint and showed no signs of rust or decay despite being buried for what Ryan estimated was thousands of years. "Have you opened it?" Patricia asked. Ryan shook his head. "We wanted to document everything first, but we're ready now." He gestured to his team, and 2 workers carefully inserted tools into a seam in the doorway. With a soft hiss, the door slid open, revealing a passage that led underground. Patricia and Ryan exchanged looks before stepping inside. Lights automatically flickered on as they entered, illuminating a long corridor. "Self-powered after all this time," Ryan whispered in awe. The corridor led to a large chamber filled with equipment unlike anything they had seen before. Sleek consoles lined the walls, and in the center stood what appeared to be a 3-dimensional map of the star system. "It's some kind of control room," Ryan said, running his hand over a console. To his surprise, it lit up at his touch. "And it's still operational." Over the next few weeks, more facilities were discovered across New Terra, and on the other planets humans had begun to settle. Research teams found similar structures on all 7 worlds they had claimed in the Orion cluster. In the main settlement hall, Patricia addressed the gathered colony leaders. "Dr. Collins and his team have made significant progress understanding the technology we found," she announced. "We now believe these worlds were once home to an advanced civilization that disappeared approximately 15,000 years ago." Ryan stepped forward with a small device in his hand. "This is a data storage unit we recovered. It contains scientific knowledge far beyond our current level. We've already used it to improve our power systems and begin manufacturing new materials." A murmur ran through the crowd. Steve Mason, head of the shipyard team, spoke up. "With this technology, we could build ships capable of returning to Earth within a decade, not the 30 years we estimated before." Patricia nodded. "That's our priority. We promised to return for those left behind, and now we can do it sooner than we dreamed." Later, as Patricia reviewed construction plans for the new shipyards, she paused to look at a map of their growing settlement. The human population across all 7 colonies had reached 1.2 million, with more born each day. They had found more than just a new home. They had discovered the means to create something greater than they had ever imagined. "The Galactic Council thought they were containing us," she said softly to herself. "Instead, they delivered us to our true inheritance." Commander Eric Moore stood on the bridge of the rescue ship Horizon, the first vessel built using the recovered alien technology. The ship had made the journey from the Orion cluster to the Sol system in just 7 months, rather than the 20-plus years of the original exodus. "We're approaching the barrier position," reported Navigation Officer Julia Banks. "Sensors detect no energy readings where the barrier should be." Eric frowned. "That's not right. Scan again." "Already did, sir. There's nothing there." It had been 50 years since humanity had fled Earth. After discovering the ancient technology and establishing prosperous colonies, they had built a fleet of ships to fulfill their promise, to return and rescue those left behind. "Proceed with caution," Eric ordered. "Full stealth mode." The Horizon and its companion ships moved slowly toward Earth. As they approached Mars, they detected debris, the remains of satellites, and what looked like parts of ships. "Sir, I'm picking up a transmission," said Communications Officer Ben Riley. "It's faint, but it's using an old Earth frequency." "Put it through," Eric said. A voice crackled over the speakers, breaking up between words. "Any human vessels? This is Earth resistance. Sector 12. Survivors need." Eric exchanged glances with his second-in-command, Lucy Winters. "Answer them." After establishing contact, the fleet was directed to a hidden base on Earth's moon. There, they found something they never expected: a small colony of survivors living in underground facilities. Samantha Hayes, leader of the Earth Resistance, met them at the airlock. She was thin, with hard eyes that had seen too much suffering. "We thought you'd never come back," she said simply. In the moon base's meeting room, Samantha explained what had happened after the Exodus fleet left. The Galactic Council kept the barrier up for 5 years. Then one day, it just disappeared. We thought it was a good sign. Her voice grew bitter. It wasn't. They attacked 3 days later. Attacked? Eric couldn't believe what he was hearing. The Council attacked Earth. Samantha nodded. They said Earth had violated the quarantine by sending ships away. They knew about the Exodus fleet. They decided to make an example of us. She activated a holographic display showing Earth. Large areas of the planet were dark, dead zones where nothing grew. They used weapons we'd never seen before. Billions died in the first week. Those who survived scattered, went underground. We've been fighting back with whatever we could salvage for decades. Eric felt sick. How many survived? Maybe 30 million, spread across hidden bunkers and bases. Some on Earth, some here on the moon, some on Mars. Lucy leaned forward. The Council races. They just destroyed Earth and left. Not exactly, Samantha said. They maintain orbital stations to ensure we don't rebuild our technology. They have ground patrols in major ruins, but mostly, they think they've won. They don't consider us a threat anymore. She pulled out a data crystal and placed it on the table. For 45 years, we've been gathering intelligence. Survivors who escaped Earth infiltrated Council worlds. We mapped their territories, their defenses, their weaknesses. It's all here. Eric picked up the crystal. You've been planning revenge. Samantha's eyes flashed. We've been planning justice. The next day, shuttles from the rescue fleet began evacuating survivors from the moon base. Similar operations started at hidden locations across Earth. The plan was to bring as many people as possible back to the Orion cluster colonies. As Eric watched the survivors board, many thin and sick from years of hardship, he made a decision. This rescue mission would become something more. The ships of the Orion fleet carried technology the Council had never seen. They had the element of surprise. "Commander," Lucy said, interrupting his thoughts. "The first evacuation groups are loaded. 6 more locations to go." Eric nodded. "Begin the launches. And Lucy, contact the Orion Confederation. Tell them we're not just bringing survivors home. What else are we doing? We're going to make the Council pay for what they did to Earth." Admiral Lorig Griffin studied the holographic display showing the Zeraxian colony world of Vega Prime. The planet glowed blue-green in the center of the war room aboard her flagship, the Artemis. "Their defense grid is focused on conventional attack vectors," she explained to her officers. "They have no idea we can approach using the predecessor jump technology." It had been 6 months since the rescue fleet returned to the Orion cluster with Earth's survivors. The stories they'd brought of the Council's betrayal and Earth's destruction had united the human colonies in anger and resolve. But Griffin had convinced the Confederation leadership that direct revenge would be costly and potentially devastating. "We don't fight the way they expect," she said. "We don't fight the way they taught us at all." Nathan Spencer, once a civilian programmer and now head of electronic warfare, pointed to several spots on the hologram. "We've identified these communication relay stations. If we can place our devices on them, we can monitor all Zeraxian military communications in the sector." Griffin nodded. "Begin the operation." Across Galactic Council space, strange events began to occur. On Vega Prime, the Zeraxian defense grid suddenly went offline during a routine test. By the time it reactivated, small stealth craft had already departed, leaving behind nearly undetectable monitoring devices. On Vendethi trading outposts, shipments of valuable technology mysteriously disappeared, only to reappear on remote colony worlds that had been kept deliberately underdeveloped by the Council. The Caraxian Mining Guild discovered that their production records had been altered, hiding the fact that 20% of their ore was being diverted. When they reported the discrepancy to the Council, they were accused of fraud and heavily fined. "The Council is beginning to fracture," reported Griffin's intelligence chief, Paul Warren. 3 months into what they called the Shadow War, several minor races have filed formal complaints against the elder species. Griffin reviewed the reports with satisfaction, and our other projects. Proceeding as planned. We've made contact with 14 subjugated worlds. They're very interested in the technology we've offered. The pattern continued for nearly 2 years. Human ships, using transportation methods unknown to the Council, struck without warning and disappeared just as quickly. They never attacked civilian targets and never took lives unnecessarily. Instead, they focused on disrupting the Council's power structures, communication systems, and economic controls. Remote colonies suddenly found themselves with advanced technology that freed them from dependence on the Central Council worlds. Smaller Council races discovered evidence that the elder races had been manipulating their development for millennia. During a rare meeting at the Orion Confederation capital on New Terra, Griffin met with Samantha Hayes, who now represented Earth's survivors in the government. The latest reports from our agents in Council space are encouraging, Griffin said. 3 more member races have declared independence from the Council in the past month. Samantha looked at the strategic display showing the known galaxy. Large sections that once showed Council control now appeared as independent territories. They still don't know it's us behind it all, she asked. Griffin shook her head. They suspect, but they can't prove it. Their sensors can't detect our ships when we use the predecessor drive technology. As far as they know, humans are safely contained in the Orion cluster, building our little colony and posing no threat. When do we reveal ourselves? Samantha's eyes held the same hard look they had when Griffin first met her on Earth's moon. Not yet, Griffin replied. Each month, more Council worlds break away. Each month, their power weakens while ours grows stronger. We're dismantling their empire piece by piece, and they don't even realize who's doing it. Samantha nodded slowly. They thought they could break us. Instead, we're breaking them. Griffin looked at the display again, seeing not just the current state of the galaxy but its future. A future where humanity would help create something better than the stagnant hierarchy that had rejected and then tried to destroy them. We're not just fighting for revenge, she said quietly. We're fighting for a new beginning. Scientist Michelle Richards sat cross-legged on the floor of the ancient chamber deep beneath New Terra's surface. The walls around her glowed with soft blue light, covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change as she watched them. 3 years had passed since the Shadow War began. While Admiral Griffin's forces continued to weaken the Galactic Council, Michelle had been studying the predecessor technology that had given humanity its edge. I know you're here, she said softly to the empty room. I can feel you watching us. For months, she had sensed something within the ancient systems, not just programming but awareness. The technology responded differently to her than to others, almost as if it recognized her somehow. Suddenly, the light in the room intensified. The air shimmered, and a figure formed before her, a being made of light and energy, vaguely humanoid but clearly not human. You have called, the figure said, its voice resonating directly in Michelle's mind. And we have answered. Michelle's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. You're the predecessors, the ones who built this technology. We were once like you, beings of flesh who walked these worlds. Now we are something else. Over the next several hours, Michelle learned the truth. The predecessors had not gone extinct. They had evolved beyond physical form. Thousands of years ago, they too had faced prejudice from the elder races now leading the Galactic Council. They feared our rapid advancement, the being explained, just as they feared yours. But rather than fight, we chose to transcend. We left our technology as a legacy for those who might follow our path. Why choose us? Michelle asked. We did not choose. The technology responds to compatible minds, those with creativity, adaptability, and the capacity for growth. You found us because you were ready. When Michelle brought this discovery to the Confederation leadership, reactions were mixed. Some feared contact with such an advanced intelligence. Others saw the tremendous opportunity it presented. Fleet Admiral Daniel Harrison, was among the first to understand the implications. If the predecessors faced the same prejudice we did, then the Council has been suppressing advancement for millennia, he said during the emergency session. This isn't just about Earth anymore. It's about freeing the entire galaxy from stagnation. Michelle nodded. The predecessors have offered to guide us, to teach us how to use their technology to its full potential. They believe we can succeed where they chose not to try, creating a galaxy where advancement is celebrated, not feared. Under the predecessors' guidance, human technology leaped forward. Ships became faster and more powerful. Communication systems reached across the galaxy instantly. Energy production increased tenfold. In her lab, Michelle worked with a team of scientists to understand the predecessors' most remarkable achievement: the ability to manipulate space-time itself. They don't just travel between stars, she explained to Admiral Harrison during his visit to her facility. They move between realities, between moments in time. Harrison watched as a small probe disappeared from one containment field and appeared in another across the room. "Can we weaponize this?" he asked. Michelle shook her head. "That's not what they intended this technology for. And honestly, we don't need weapons. The Council's power is already crumbling. What we need is to show the galaxy a better way forward." Harrison considered this. After decades of planning justice for Earth, the idea of moving beyond revenge was difficult. But he was a strategist at heart, and he could see the larger picture. "So instead of destroying the Council, we offer an alternative," he said slowly. "A new order based on cooperation rather than control." "Exactly," Michelle replied. "The predecessors believe this is why they preserved their technology for so long, waiting for a species that could both master it and use it wisely." As Harrison left the facility, he gazed up at the night sky. Stars that once seemed impossibly distant were now within easy reach, and beyond them lay not just new worlds, but new possibilities for all sentient life. The time for shadows was ending. Soon, humanity would step into the light, not as conquerors, but as liberators. The massive flagship Redemption appeared in orbit above Centauri Prime, the capital world of the Galactic Council. Within seconds, similar ships materialized above every major council world throughout the galaxy. There was no warning, no time for defenses to activate. On the bridge of the Redemption, Ambassador Olivia Baker smoothed her formal uniform and took a deep breath. "All ships report successful positioning," said Fleet Admiral Harrison from beside her. "The council chambers have been surrounded. No one has entered or left the building." Olivia nodded. "Open a channel to the council chambers." On worlds across the galaxy, council representatives looked up in shock as communication systems activated simultaneously. The face of a human woman appeared on screens in every council chamber. "I am Ambassador Olivia Baker of the Orion Confederation," she announced calmly. 70 years ago, your council banished humanity from galactic affairs. Today, we return to offer you a choice." In the Grand Council chamber on Centauri Prime, High Chancellor Zorax rose from his throne, his blue skin pale with shock. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Your ships could not have reached all our worlds simultaneously. And yet here we are," Olivia replied. Her image appeared on the massive screen at the front of the chamber. "Your understanding of what is possible has always been limited, Chancellor. That limitation has cost the galaxy centuries of progress." Admiral Harrison had argued for a show of force, a demonstration of the weapons they now possessed that could disable entire defense systems without harming civilians. But the Confederation leadership had chosen a different approach. "We know what you did to Earth," Olivia continued, her voice steady despite the emotion she felt. "We know how you betrayed those left behind and tried to erase humanity from the galaxy." Murmurs spread through the chamber. Many of the younger council representatives looked confused. That dark chapter had been hidden from them. "That was a necessary action to contain a dangerous species," Zorax sputtered. "Was it?" Olivia asked. "Or was it fear of what we might become?" Fear that we might advance too quickly, challenge your authority, disrupt the order you've maintained for millennia. She paused, letting her words sink in. For the past 3 years, that fear has been justified. It was humanity that helped your subjugated worlds gain independence. It was humanity that exposed the lies you've told to keep smaller races dependent on you. It was humanity that showed the galaxy there is another way. On dozens of worlds, Council representatives watched as data streamed across their screens, proof of the corruption and manipulation the elder races had engaged in for thousands of years. Today, we offer you a choice, Olivia said. Continue your rule through deception and control, and face the consequences, or join us in creating something better. A galactic union based on cooperation, innovation, and mutual respect. To demonstrate their sincerity, the Confederation revealed their most powerful technologies, not as threats, but as gifts. Energy systems that could end resource shortages. Medical advances that could treat diseases the Council had never solved. Transportation methods that would connect the galaxy in ways previously unimaginable. Over the following weeks, Council races made their decisions. The smaller, younger species were the first to join the proposed union. Then came the middle powers, seeing opportunity in the new order. Finally, even some of the elder races, their power already diminished by defections and exposed secrets, agreed to the new terms. 1 year later, Olivia stood in the newly constructed Union Hall on New Terra as representatives from over 200 worlds signed the charter establishing the Galactic Union. Earth, now being carefully restored with advanced environmental technology, held a place of honor as humanity's ancestral home. As the last Zoraxian counselor, Zorax himself, reluctantly added his signature to the document, he turned to Olivia with grudging respect. "How did you accomplish so much after we cast you out?" he asked. "What was your secret?" Olivia smiled. "You gave us no choice but to become stronger. By banishing us, you forced us to find our own path. And that path led to something greater than either of us could have imagined alone." As the ceremony concluded, she gazed out the window at the stars. No longer distant points of light, but homes and allies in a galaxy transformed by humanity's journey from exiles to architects of a new age. The banishment that was meant to be their end had only been their beginning.